Hi everyone coming in. We got folks streaming in. I'm glad this Monday actually falls on a President's Day, or whatever you may choose to call it. Um, so while we let folks pour in, I'm so excited to be chatting once again with Ruth Ben-Ghiat, scholar of fascism and other highly of the moment au courant topics.
Sadly,
Um,
sadly
yeah,
relevant.
sadly, yeah. And as you're pouring in, our ritual with these live shows has been to tell us where you're coming in from. Folks already know geographically, but also emotionally. So you can give us a place and a more kind of metaphysical
A state of
place that you're
mind.
coming. A state of
A s-
mind, a state of heart.
I woke up kind of fed up with everything, and then so I'm glad we're here together because being together is part of surviving this for the long term, the long
Yes.
haul.
Yes. It's wild, isn't it? So we're gonna get started while folks pour in, because I want to reward the early comers. Um, so I want to actually start the conversation today, if it's okay with you, Ruth, with something hopeful today, which is that at this very hour, in in places across this country, people are meeting in protest. These 50501
Hmm.
movement. And I wonder, you've thought so much, you and I've talked about a pro democracy movement, whether we have one, what it would take to have one. Do you think we're starting to see the seeds of something that feels to you like a real pro democracy movement that, has some of what it takes?
I think so. I think, I mean, we've got certain people in the Democratic Party, so from the institution, that party institution stepping forward. Chris Murphy, I know you're speaking with him, I guess tomorrow, right? Maxwell Fra, other people, and we've got disparate things, and um, I believe that they will come together. We've got public protests starting, and we have to, you know we can't expect this to happen immediately because we have been living through what I call in my book a shock event, right? I don't use the word shock and awe, but shock event when things have been happening very quickly. So it's best to resist once you know what's happening. There are things you can resist without knowing the big picture that are injustices, each of them in their own right worth protesting. But um, I think that if people were disappointed there wasn't an instant outpouring, things are a little different this time doesn't mean it's not going to happen.
What's so striking is that I think we all knew this was going to be bad, but the sense of deluge has been so overwhelming, even for people I know who are,
Yep.
journalists who've covered wars,
Yep.
who are like used to, so people like you who've like studied the worst things and stared at the worst things in the face for much of your career. The deluge of the moment is very difficult. In the New York Times, M. Gesson wrote a really interesting column recently about how, like, in some ways, this is the purpose of autocrats
Yep.
is to deluge you with like dumb stuff that you have to react dumbly to,
Yep.
and everybody's then just like treading water in dumbness, like talking about the Gulf of America. Um, can you,
Yep.
but can you talk about how you see, just maybe personally, how are you dealing with deluge and reaction versus, let's say, what this pro democracy movement is trying to do, or what M. Gesson talks about, which is like we actually need to articulate and build and model something positive and affirming and awesome in comparison. How are you dealing with that balance of the necessity of reaction and
Yeah.
not getting stuck in the autocrats game of reacting to stupidity?
Yeah, I guess, and I'm like, example of like, I predicted a lot of this stuff. I know it theoretically. I thought that Trump 1.0 was much worse than others. I've been named in a suit by Trump against CNN. We've all been through our things, and yet, um, when the speed at which it's happening, and it makes it even for me, of course, going through it as an American, difficult. So what I've been trying to do, I've canceled a lot of stuff so that I could have more time to think. I'm spending more time with friends and family and community stuff, but I'm also paring down things, because for me personally, it's very important to be able to, again, as I said, see the big picture, because you have to be strategic. That's also what M. Gesson, who wrote a book called Surviving Autocracy, and it comes from Putin's Russia, um, is that you will exhaust yourself if you try and react to everything. And so being strategic and understand where to, each of us has our own talents, and understanding how you can best help, because you can't help in every way, right? But you can help in some ways that are that follow your own gifts. And I think if you do public things, you know what is valuable to people, and so you follow that. And you follow your heart, and you follow your conscience. um and there it's harder, because it's we have, of course, people are coming in saying, I'm pissed off too. I'm like jumping out of my skin with righteous anger. And so we need that balance. We need to know how to calm ourselves, how to take care of ourselves, so that we can re-engage. So it's a
But just
balance.
that I want to sort of say that again for people, because I think what you said is so important, and the fact that you're saying it maybe gives some other people permission. So you are obviously as vigilant as ever, and you're focused in your newsletter, Lucid, and in other places on being vigilant, and you're taking more time to think in this time,
Yeah.
which is not reacting, and more time for friends, family, that kind of thing, right? And I think that's just important for a lot of people to hear. I think people feel guilty about some of those things, and I think it's important to actually not feel guilty about some
Yeah.
of those other things. Um, so there's this story today that about Doge and this like young programmer working for Elon Musk, accessing personal tax
Yeah.
database at the IRS. Um, and everyone watching this, your personal info, returns, whatever, now available to these people. It got me thinking about something that I was thinking about writing about, but I wanted to just like try this out on you, because that's what we sort of do on
Yeah.
these things. It struck me in this moment of, so you just picture this kind of geeky Doge kid now in the IRS files, obviously working for Musk, who is working for the this president. What struck me about it was the intersection and collision in some ways of two very different cultures in a moment. And here's what I mean by it. There's sort of like a Silicon Valley, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, like cool-headed business, clinical, just like no humanity, just like go into things, look at spreadsheets, like just
Yeah.
pure analytical brain, right? Which is like it's just like raw capitalism, and it's purely analytic and kind of almost anti-human in its,
Yeah.
and that very much seems to be like the Doge spirit. But then it is intersecting with this other culture that's almost the opposite of that, which is like mafia culture or honor culture, cultures of like vengeance and retribution, right? Which is a
Yeah.
very different, also a business in a way. The mafia is a business, but it's very different. It's about relationships and trust and honor and vendettas and that kind of thing, right? And in a way, these are two business cultures that don't really intersect all the time, right? Like one that the Goldman Sachs way of running a business is different from, let's say, a waste management company in New Jersey that's part of the mafia. But here in the Doge thing, you really have this intersection of like the clinical spreadsheet people put in service of this culture of like retribution, and vendettas and like mafia. And I wonder
Yeah.
how you just see that intersection. I don't know if that makes sense, but how you see that
Oh,
intersection of worlds.
not only does it make sense, I mean, that's what Trump's all about. He's a businessman who acts like a mafia boss. And I'm not the only person to observe that. The whole and our government, I mean, what he did during his first term is that, like authoritarian, this is I think I have a sentence in Strongman that there's a very strong overlap between the cultural values of organized crime and authoritarianism. And so, um, you know, one of the things they do is that they use public office for private enrichment. They're all corrupt. And so Trump, during his first term, the Washington Post did this investigation. I've quoted it so many times. It's also in my book that through the beginning of the pandemic, so for 3 full years, he spent 1/3 of his time visiting Trump branded properties. So that was the first time. Okay. And there was just endless self dealing. And then Kushner and all that stuff, the trademarks with China for him and Ivanka. So governance is about bettering your business bottom line and using repression at the same time against, people. The other thing is what we're seeing now with it's like who knows what they're going to do with this tax information, but all this data that they're getting on individuals and organizations is going to be weaponized. So it's like magnifying it at scale, because during Trump 1.0 there were people who had the classic autocratic persecution through their tax records. It's just that they were big figures like James Comey, Andrew McCabe. They had harassment through like audits, and that's what Putin does. That's what Orban does. Erdogan, they all do it. They harass people through like audits. Now, now the entire so like the old school is that you use the institutions to get to people, and you clean out those institutions, you get rid of non-loyalists. Now we have this huge magnification, muskification, or whatever we're going to call it, where the entire institution either going to be wrecked or everybody's data is going to be taken now and anybody can be harassed. So it's like a magnification of that. And the last thing I'll say is that um, I think of Chile a lot. It's a case study in my book, the military dictatorship, because there they had it was a laboratory for neoliberal policies, and so they went through all the agencies, getting rid of the waste, and at the same time, they were certainly using, they were terrorists, they were torturing people. So there are moments in history where these cultures have come together